In today's webinar, Platform Explore Software Built for Cannabis Businesses. This is part of our educational webinar series. You can find previous recordings and more information about how to register for upcoming webinars on the resources section of our website. A few housekeeping items before we get started. Attendees will be on mute throughout the webinar. You can ask any questions in the control panel. I'll show you how to do this in the next slide. We will also give contact information at the end of the presentation, and we'll send a recording of this webinar within 1 business day. On the screen, you can see where to expand and collapse your control panel and where to type in questions for us. MJ Freeway is the industry-leading software consulting and data solution for cannabis businesses, processing $5 billion in cannabis sales transactions and serving clients in every regulated market in the United States, Canada, Europe, and Australia. We've also consulted with over 1,000 clients in all aspects of cannabis operations, including business plans, financial forecasts, applications, build-outs, operations, and business reviews. We've won 22 licenses, including cultivation, dispensary, and processing. MJ Freeway is a comprehensive solution. It's not just the software, it is a comprehensive solution for your cannabis business. So I'm excited about today's retail demo webinar. Seth Dewberry is going to be taking you through the retail portion of our software. He is our onboarding director, and he has such a rich history in the cannabis industry. I'll let him tell you more about himself. It's all yours, Seth.
Perfect. Thank you, Kiana. Let me go ahead and share my screen here.
Cool.
All right, excellent. So welcome, everybody. You know, we're doing a few of these in the previous and subsequent weeks here to kind of cover all the modules, you know, as far as our new platform. And what we're going to look at today is retail. So specifically, you know, some of my history at MJ Freeway really quickly. I've been with the company since 2010. I started out running the support department, and for those of you who might be familiar with the system, especially, you know, years ago, we probably talked on the support end or different training ends or things like that. Now, after that, you know, I moved into consulting, and then, you know, now I'm back to onboarding. So I'm the director of onboarding, you know, onboarding folks onto this new platform as we speak. So as we go through the flows here, of course, you know, we're talking again about a web-based platform. So it's a web-based platform hosted on Amazon. We started hosting on Amazon at the beginning of the year this year. And for any, you know, international clients, we have stand-ups wherever we need them. For instance, we've got an Amazon server stand-up in Canada as well as the United States. Now, when we look at the platform here and log in, you saw a few things. There's of course a cultivation and an extraction infusion. Today we'll be focusing on retail. But the idea here of the sites is basically you know, these are locations. So if you have, say, 3 retail stores, you'd have 3 different stores here. And there will be plenty of time, well, there'll be some time at the end for questions and answers, and we can talk, you can, you know, feel free to write down your questions. These might be things like, are patients shared across locations? Well, the answer to that is yes. You know, so for instance, if you've got 3 retail stores, you won't have to enter the same patient or customer 3 different times. Now, as we start to get a little more granular, we're going to go through some workflows, everything from putting a patient in the system here, looking at their details, going through the point of sale. We'll look at everything on the supply chain end, so all the product coming in, all of the product coming into the location through the vendors and the partners. And you know, what we'll also look at is, besides system flows, we'll be looking at some of the settings in the system. This, you know, this is not the thing we focus on a ton on these demos. This gets a little granular, But the idea is that you can see some structure of the site here. We'll talk about some customer groups. For instance, this is where you can have any types of groups in the system. You know, veterans that maybe get a different standard pricing than VIP folks and such. So, you know, we'll talk about some of the system settings and the setup. We'll talk about some variations of workflows as well as some features. So, for instance, we'll look at, you know, as I log into a location here, as far as my register and stuff, you know, we're going to look at some other things as far as, let me actually get this moved off the screen here. So we'll look at some things as far as online ordering. So we'll look at our online shopping cart, and we'll also look at how that flow gets handled in the system, in the queues where orders are coming in from the in-store flow versus orders that are, you know, coming in from online. And we'll look at the fulfillment process. This might be the person in the back, you know, loading up bags and waiting for patients to come in or going out for delivery. And then, of course, you know, we'll talk about some other features as well as some supply chain features. And then, you know, like I mentioned, we'll talk more about the reporting. So as we look at the reporting in here, we're going to have dashboard style reporting, you know, and this will really function as a, you know, for a lot of different pieces, helping us see, you know, sales broken down by gender and age, all the way down to some other reports, which might be, you know, payment reports. And I've got about a half dozen sample reports here for us. So as we jump into the system, I'm going to take us through and we're going to look at, you know, structurally a couple of the setup pieces. This will give us an idea as we start talking about workflows. For instance, in the system, it's a setup, very involved, and once it's done, the system is extremely easy to use. And the setup happens, which we can also talk about a little bit as far as the onboarding process, which is my department, where you get a dedicated rep for the onboarding process. We have a onboarding, you know, workflow and timeline. You know, some people a couple weeks, some people onboard over a 60-day period to get things set up. You'll have a test site that you'll be able to play around. And really when we're looking at this, you know, we have our settings, and think of this as an organizational followed by a facility level structure. All I mean by that is it's just ease of use. My organization are all of my locations together. So there are some things that you only set up one time for the whole organization. For instance, what strains does my organization use? You know, so if I had, say, 3 different stores, I'd be able to add the strains, and that would happen for all 3 stores if I wanted it to, more or less. So I can set up multiple things all at once for our larger operations. Now we see a list here of, you know, what we end up with is, you know, thousands and thousands of strains here in the system, and these are pre-populated strains. This is more of a sample site here that we're looking at, but it's basically normalized data, kind of like a Leafly strain bank, a little bit bigger. And what we have is the ability, so if I wanted to, say, put Blue Dream into my system, well, there's several variations of Blue Dream. I can check that off and add that to my inventory. Now, there's, of course, the ability to add new strains in here as well. So if we had a new strain, it's a very easy addition here. It's basically just adding things through tags. So I'd probably do something like that. And, you know, what we also see with data entry is everybody likes to enter data different ways. Well, it's not the case anymore, to where that just added that strain to the system. So we would create that, and if somebody went in here to add that again, they couldn't. They would just be guided to the strain that's already there. And this is a theme throughout the system as you get things set up. It gives a very strong data consistency piece, so that when we report on, you know, sales by strain, Blue Dream doesn't show up 3 different times, spelled 3 different ways. So not to get too much more into the setup, but you've got the nth level of setup here as far as the ability to decide which, weights your company deals with. Do you deal with quarter grams? Do you deal with, grower pounds versus real pounds? Adding any weights in here as possible. You've got the ability to set up all of your categories and subcategories. And really where this starts to become, extremely helpful, if we look at a sample report here. So for instance, on the system, we can set up any number of categories and subcategories. And when we look at that, now we have, for instance, this reporting piece where we can drill in. Say I have my infusions. Well, in my infusions, I then have all of my subcategories here. This report happens to be showing the percent sales of each subcategory. But what we end up seeing is these numbers adjusting as we click into these categories. So when we when we onboard onto this software, we kind of, consult to some degree on, well, why would I want to set up other categories? Well, it's for a couple things. It's for navigating product menus, for online orders and stuff like that, as well as reporting purposes. You may, in your accessories, want to know the difference between your high-dollar vaporizers and your general glass. Those would be two separate categories potentially. Now, as we start to come closer to the workflow here, the thing that I want to make sure we point out is with all the functionality in here, there's, of course, the ability to set up any number of roles, and you can basically give very granular permissions throughout the site. So what this looks like is, abilities maybe to create some things versus view or manage some things. You might have intake folks who only, can view and manage customers, but maybe not create new customers. So those kinds of things. So you've got very granular user roles in here for who can do what and see which pages and whatnot. Now, the general idea here is every piece of inventory exists in a location. So you set up your sales locations. The point here between sales locations and registers to talk about really simply is you set up cash locations, which are registers, and inventory locations, which are sales or storage locations. And the idea, I might have 2 patient consultants, sometimes referred to as bud tenders, but I might have 2 patient consultants, and I might, want them pulling off the same pool of inventory for doing sales, but tracking their cash in different registers. Or I may very well want them to have their own pools of inventory at each station. So that would be the ability to set up any number of sales locations, and what you'll start to get is reporting on how quickly items turn through these sales locations. So you can have sales location 1 that's then broken down into different shelves and everything. And you can see which shelves are turning over the fastest. And that really sets us up pretty well for some workflows here. And what we're going to look at, of course, we'll be selling some products first of all. So when we sell items in here, just know that when we talk about inventory, we can get into the traceability and the batch tracking and those kinds of things. That's all, of course, in the system. But in general, to take us through a basic flow, what would normally happen, because we can designate a profile, so to speak, as either a medical, in this case I've got both turned on, so as a medical patient or a recreational customer. But in general, what's happening here is I'll look up the patient from here. That will give me, for any sort details in the system here, I can look up and very quickly come to a patient. I can also scan a driver's license in here, type in a phone number to look up a patient. Any of the search criteria will search. And so now we have, Curtis here. And we would, if I was at the front, I would check Curtis in. Now what that does is puts Curtis into our queue here. So this is the point where the patient consultant probably walks out and either starts the order or fast tracks the order. So to give you what usually happens in most of the stores we set up, it is literally I'll come out here, hit fast track. This will bring the order into the point of sale. I will then scan barcodes. And what I'm doing right there is I just, I don't have a barcode scanner with me, so I cut and pasted, but it's the same general idea. I'm scanning barcodes. I can, put coupons on orders. I have I can also print barcodes for my coupons, so I can just scan a coupon onto the order that way. But I have the ability to very granularly, select line item coupons. When I apply coupons, those displays are here to tell me what coupon went on what item. I've got everything out in front of me I need here. And I've also got the ability to look at Curtis's information. So, Curtis is fairly new here, but what we would actually see, if I'd picked a patient with some history, we would see every past order that they have. We'd see what the most purchased items are out of each category. And we can always see notes, get into the profiles if the patient consultants have the permissions. So just a lot of information with which to interact with the patient. And then after this part, it's if you're using a touch screen, it's very easy here. I can very easily knock coupons off, knock items off the order here, and when I'm done, I go to payment. I can of course do a split payment. So maybe they're giving me $5 in cash. I don't need to type in the zeros or anything like that, and then maybe it's a $10 debit that's going to have some cash back, one of the ATM solutions. Portable ATMs, so to speak. But the deal here is we see what payment types were, tendered and everything. We can view receipts. We can obviously print receipts, print labels. And then what ends up happening here is, you can do a custom note and this is a setting you can turn on or off, but I can put a custom note here on any given receipt. So this really gives a lot of versatility all the way out the door with the patient. And then, that's the standard flow. Some of the pieces in here that we like to talk about are, for instance, I can pull up a patient, view the order history, all in one place, whether I'm the front desk, the receptionist talking to the patient as they check in, or I'm the patient consultant talking to the patient out on the floor. I can see everything the patient has purchased, every order that's happened. I can start refunds from here. The refund is very slick. The refund from cash versus, restocking the inventory. We can see here this has added this to the refund order. I can take it back off. I can restock if I want to or not. Do it all right from here. I can reprint receipts very easily. For those of you folks who've been running a store for more than a year, every tax season, patients come in and they want to know what they purchased so they can write their stuff off. Well, you can pop all that stuff out of here very easily. If the proper permissions exist, I can also change the payment method on an order if that got messed up, if it was cash instead of debit, for instance. I just have a lot of details with which to work with the patient here. Now, the general idea here is, because when we're out in the queues, now we've still got, we've already run our person through the queue. So let's come back out to our actual patients and start somebody else. Now, starting this order, this is a different flow in the point of sale. So now imagine a flow where my patient consultant actually has maybe a tablet and they're out on a floor where they don't have barcodes of stuff. You can resize the screen here however you want. If you're on a smaller form factor device, you can, the page responds automatically no matter what size we're talking about. This will become very relevant with the online ordering as well if somebody's ordering through their phone. Basically, the software is a mobile app. And so I will blow it back up here for demo purposes. But now I'm the patient consultant out on the floor, and I don't have the inventory in front of me, but I'm taking orders of what people want. So people might want anything from, a gram of 303 all the way to potentially a Viking hat. And this is just representative of a unit-based item versus a gram-based item. There's, of course, pre-pack items in the software. We can see at any time from here, Vincent. So we can see his details, what he's purchased, what his last orders were, what his most purchased items are. So, looking at this, I could, instead of searching for the Viking hat, I know Vincent likes the Viking hat, so I can pop right to it and add another one to the order here. So you can kind of basically just reload orders. I see the shopping cart here, and really what happens now is I would say fast track this to the point of sale, Now, if I'm also packaging the order, I pick this up and package it. If I'm not the one packaging the order, really what happens here is, let me see, I can kind of demo this actually, especially with the online ordering, shopping cart. But the idea here is I scan a barcode, and this is now, so I've got my 303 OG flour, and when I scan a barcode of the 303 OG flour, it automatically associates the proper batch with that item. This is the fulfillment workflow. And this really takes us directly into the online ordering piece, because the scenario we just went through was a patient consultant or a bud tender, walking around a show floor with a tablet, or even walking out into the lobby with a tablet on a busy day. Where that picks up is the same thing basically as online ordering. It's just now that your patient is your bud tender, so to speak. And I say that because the patient, this is the shopping cart. And one of the things to, kind of make clear here, this is a WordPress plugin that comes with the marketing package. So you can actually go on to WordPress, and we even have this right on here. So the WordPress plugin is just right here. You'll see, you can look it up, your developer can look it up, pull it right off of here. There are some training videos in our knowledge base to show you just how to set this thing up. And with that online ordering cart, it will post your menu, which will have, your real-time inventory on here, search by category. I can see these things. I can go into my concentrates. Very pretty menu. And when an order is put in, of course, the patient interacts with the items on the menu. Maybe we want, I guess we sell quarter 2 half grams for whatever reason. Add to cart. This gives the shopping cart all the basics on the, on the digital, on the online shopping. And then what happens when our patient submits their order, it shows up in our system in the queues here. Now, notice this is another situation where orders are being filled. So somebody's sitting in the back with a barcode gun, scanning items onto the orders, and then, leaving the order until the patient comes in, at which point we look up, Vincent, and complete his payment. So this is really now something that can be done by, different people. The packaging is different from the payment. And if we're talking about delivery, the mobile responsiveness allows you to pull this thing up on a cell phone if you're at the door, and complete the payment, mobily. Now, we'll get into a little bit of workflow as far as the inventory, but what I want to make clear on a few pieces here that have always been crucial to operators. There's the pricing groups. So you've got your pricing groups, your top shelves, your mid shelves. You decide what weights that you sell in the system, and you decide what your prices are, of course. You also have this piece where you've got, platinum members, veterans, standard members that have maybe certain standard breaks off of the standard price. So my platinum members somehow get, only pay 60% of base. And this is a nice to have on the front end to keep things so you're not adding coupons for every single order for every single deal, and you don't forget, to add the veteran coupon. This is automatic. But keep in mind, anything that's functional on the front end is also a reporting hook. So now on this, I've got my seniors, my VIPs, my veterans. And just like we saw on the other reporting, this is really now a case where I can see, if we look at the numbers over here, I can see what my VIPs are spending or what my veterans are spending. And this a little, as far as sample data goes, what we see here is then also the ability to do gender, day of the week, age group. So I can get all the way down into rec versus med. If I had a bunch of stuff in here on my demo site, I would be able to see the recreational customers, maybe who are females, who are VIPs, who shopped on Mondays, for instance. Very granular, and you can see what coupons has been used, what their average orders are, all these kind of marketing metrics. All the way down to if you're keeping zip codes on folks, from which zip codes they're shopping. So, and I have a little sample of, actually that on some of my sample data. So if we wanted to see, down to the zip code from which people were shopping, that would of course show up on a map. And, at this point, this is kind of a sample report with one of those maps. And this is loading, just another view of the gender versus the age versus the rec versus met. But then we've got this piece where now I can see, who's shopping from certain zip codes. Looks like this is, everybody's forgetting to fill in the gender in this case, but that actually can't happen anymore. But you see very granular, and this can give you tools with which to market to these different areas or these different segments of the population, of course, for instance. Now, furthermore, beyond standard pricing, there's of course coupons. And like I was saying, coupons you can print out barcodes for. So in the end, you'll maybe click the screen 3 or 4 times during a sale because you're scanning products, you're scanning barcodes, then you're clicking buttons and typing in a dollar amount. And the coupons are very mistake preventative. By that I mean, there's the filters like minimum order amount, the number of times a coupon can be used or per patient. So this is a one time per patient. All the basics that you would have seen in the previous version as well, but then a bunch of new stuff. For instance, manufacturer coupons. This is a big thing as far as when we have manufacturer coupons and we need to report to the manufacturer so they can reimburse us. There's coupons by vendor, coupons, of course, by category, but also coupons by patient group or customer group. So my platinum members maybe get 15% off subtotal. Actually, these will be line items the way I'm going to do it. And maybe on infusions, on edibles, maybe just on Sundays before noon. So the only reason I just do this little weird thing is, all the way down to day of the week and time of day filters on your coupons. So no longer is your manager getting up at 7:45 a.m. to activate a coupon just to make sure the coupon's ready but not usable past noon, for instance, at which point the manual inactivation would happen in a lot of systems. So very automated here on where we're scanning coupons, and they don't even work if they're not supposed to work during that time period for those products, for those types of customers, for the buying frequency. Lots of different pricing options in here. Now, before we get on to some inventory, I'm going to talk right away about labels. And this is something you will see most, softwares kind of avoid. Labels are a compliance piece, but if only compliance is observed, then you have terrible looking labels. You've got the situation where you've got the 2x4 label that's got to go on the little, concentrate packet or whatever. Sometimes that's unavoidable due to compliance, but the whole point with this system is you can create custom labels all the way from custom zebra print language code. This is basically like HTML for browsers. The ZPL, the zebra is kind of the standard in printing. Custom disclaimers, messages for every product type. If you're more of the Nevada, Oregon kind of compliance thing where it's just crazy granular based on every subcategory of every product, but also from I want to make a different size label that fits on my little concentrate thing because I don't need to print a big label till the end of the sale, which is the patient label. So all these different, parameters can be observed. There's the custom label builder. And there's even the ability to, put QR codes on the labels. That's one of those things. Somebody zaps with, you've programmed a website into a QR code on your label. Somebody zaps it with a cell phone app, and it takes them to your website. And they've got online ordering. So that's one of the pieces that people use a lot of the time. Now, on the other end of this, of course, is really the inventory management. And when we're looking at that, it's we can start with the supply chain. Now, during the supply chain, I also like to kind of slip in a little bit of feature stuff here. By that, I mean state system integrations. And I don't have the state system integrations turned on this site just because it kind of impedes if I'm not actually hooked up to a state system. But I do have that stuff hooked up, excuse me for a moment as I click through every other tab here, on my other sites. And what this is really just, I go into manage state integrations. There's the leaf, there's the metric, there's whatever state integrations there are APIs currently for. And so the thing to mention, about these, it's a seamless integration to where stuff that you do in the software takes place immediately on the state, or at some points you push a button at the end of the day, like in Oregon, to send all the sales from metric over to metric. And we make this as efficient as possible. What I mean by that is, anytime there's a state system, there's a two-way API, hopefully. And with that, that means that, with your platform hooked up to your state system, let's say you're only a store. Because of course, if you're also growing and extracting and fusing, you'll send your stuff to yourself and it will show up in your system automatically. So you're not doing double data entry. But that's the same thing we have the ability to do to some extent with the state systems, depending on how the APIs are built. So for instance, if I was going to bring in a purchase order, I would go to supply chain mapping, pick my purchase order, and again, I'm not connected to a state system, but I would pick a transfer that lines up with it, and it would marry those things up as much as it could. But by that, I mean it would bring in the proper batch numbers or the proper tag numbers from the state system, those kinds of things. So lots of automations here as far as state system integration. So really, there's a lot of folks that use the system just, sometimes without the bells and whistles connected to the states. So you've got barcode scanning, you've got very few clicks on stuff, and you've got no double data entry. That will save you in a large operation, a very large operation that our current product, our current product manager ran probably, 100 hours a month in labor across, 10 stores easily from all the manual entry you'd have to do if you're not integrated. So, we can talk about everything from labor saving, which is a little boring, of course, all the way to the purchase orders and the wholesale marketplace where, people can log in and order stuff from you. But being retail, it's not likely you're wholesaling. So as we purchase order things in, there's really two parts to the purchase order. There's the order that gets placed. This order, you can send an invoice to your, vendor, so to speak, or the partner, and that will be for a certain amount of something. So you've got a partner, you've got item or items on the purchase order, as well as payment or payments. So if there's multiple payments going on here, even payments that are going to be out in the future, it gives you the ability to set future payments so that you can track those things. And so when the inventory actually shows up, now I know sometimes, especially with all of my California clients, a lot of times stuff shows up in the purchasing room and you either buy it or you don't. So of course there you'd start a purchase order and complete it at the same step. But on these, you might have something ordered that shows up later, and now it shows up later, and maybe I have someone who has permissions only to receive inventory. So they'll receive the transfer. If the state system stuff is needed, it would be, here's the manifest type stuff. And really at this point, in most markets, we are tracking batches or lots or state tag numbers. That's all that goes in here. So you don't have to re-enter the transfer when you're receiving it. It's just putting in what batch you're getting, which you don't know until it shows up to the door usually. So I would go 3030G, probably 09, 2517. That'd be my batch number. I would put this in a location, and then this is, I can save and print labels and then receive this in. This will drop the inventory over into my inventory, of course. And one of the nice things about the system is, one of the nice things is that it's consistent as far as the inventory over at, say, the cultivation works the same way as the inventory over at the retail, to the extent of I can prepackage things. So for instance, if I go in here, I can do a packaging job where 3030G is turning into 3030G prepack. So if I'm doing this at the store, for instance, buying in bulk inventory like pounds or whatever, and then packaging it. Well, this is the part where I assign, hot pants here to the packaging job. The point here is that we will know the time it takes Mr. Pants to do the packaging job based on the start and the end time, which will allow us to roll up labor into the cost of production, as well as, the diversion prevention piece. So if we give 143 grams to somebody and they bring back 20-gram bags and 10/8, for instance, that's, a reconciliation problem. So it's the diversion prevention, but it's also the packaging supplies. And, this is one of the pieces that you'll see ingredients. Ingredients, an ingredient to a packaging job might be some packaging supplies. So the system will, track the non-medicated or non-saleable inventory that goes into your processes. This, of course, if you want to see this in spades, then hit us up and we'll get you the link, the past extraction and fusion webinar that we did about a month ago, I think, because that's all that is, right? That's combinations of things, supplies being used, cost increasing. Either way, this packaging is a microcosm of that, where the labor from the packager as well as the cost of the supplies will roll up into the cost of production. And one of these other pieces when we're talking about inventory management, I always like to show the product build because it's so easy. And this is one of the pieces. Quality of life is ease of use and mistake prevention. You have flower, you have your subcategories. So maybe I have my buds and then I have the strain. This is why when I packaged the 303OG a second ago, only 303OG pre-pack came up, because things are mapped to each other. I'd put names and stuff in here, but if this were a prepackaged item, this is tracking it in batches or lots, and then I just tell the system if it's a prepackaged item or not. So I can have bulk items of things that are loose grams. I can have prepack, which are grams, eighths, quarters. Of course, I don't have to enter individual prices. The whole prepack scenario stays within one item, so I know what my grams and my eighths and all that stuff are. Versus my unit-based products. So at that point, if I did like an infusion, an edible, it's not going to ever track as grams. It's going to track as each. I have 10 edibles. But of course, I've got medicated weights. These are the milligrams. This is a 100-milligram cookie, potentially. And for those states where you need to know the net weight and the actual gross weight of the packaged edible themselves, this is some stuff in Arizona and Oregon, a little bit in Nevada. Those fields are here as well. So it's a very simple product setup. Now, for anything that we purchase, though, there's also from where we purchase it. And here we go with some more bells and whistles, so to speak. I mean, right, this is where I could have a par level, my reorder point. So I want to know when the system to tell me when I get below 100 of something. And the auto reorder, this, we already saw the purchase order, right? It's the supplier plus the items plus the payment. Well, this now gives the ability for the system to auto create this purchase order. Once I get below 1,000, auto create a purchase order for, once I get below 100, auto create a purchase order for 1,000. That'll ship an invoice off to the vendor. And then all I'm doing when I receive inventory is coming in here to my already created purchase orders and receiving transfer based on whatever the invoice number is or whatever we're doing here. Now, you can do one or the other, right? You can do it to where just the system reminds you when you get low on stuff, but you don't have to have the thing auto reordering for you by any stretch of the imagination. And look, that's a lot of the deal here. I mean, when you get into inventory, there's also the inventory by location, right? So this is where, okay, I'm going to actually move this 143 grams from some location to some other location. Now, these are kind of, taxonomically named based on sales floor one, whatever. But these can be back shelf, front shelf, left side of the safe, right side of the safe, packaging area, like whatever the locations need to be. And then, full sweep counts or even partial sweep counts, we've got the reconciliation page. And what we can see is that very large pages propagate very quickly in the browser here. So this whole page is my whole thing of inventory. but maybe I'm just adjusting a few things. Either way, I'm scanning barcodes. I have, let's see, well, these are pre-pack items, so to make it a little more clear, let's just do some bulk. I have 9103 of something. Instead, maybe I have 8500. Now, if we're connected, we've got the reasons for these. Reconciliation, we don't know where it went maybe yet, and adjust. And that'll put a piece in the history plus adjust that piece of inventory. And I can do this on a full page. This is a thing where you can just take a tablet out and knock this out on the floor. Because at the very bottom, there's of course an adjust all button for anything that's had changes made to it. And so some of the other kind of basics here, and I say basics because a lot of times when we're connected to a state system, the ingredients the test results get automatically pulled from the API, right? Because the lab puts them on the package from the producer, and then you purchase that, and if the state system knows the test results, then we know them. But that doesn't mean you can't add them manually. I don't have any packages on here, but I'd be able to scan the package for which I'm adding the test results, and then there's a whole slew of both percent and active milligrams of things. So these are the testing results of any individual package as it stands, but you've also got the ability for the estimations, and we saw that in the product. So estimations are, or previous general estimates. This can help you estimate things through a workflow, but it also can help give say on online ordering a patient a good idea of what what to expect with the test results, even though, as any operator knows, these can vary quite a bit based on the strain or the lab. That's really the general idea. There's inventory flow, there's patient flow, and then of course there's cash flow through here. So we have sales locations, vaults, drop safes, and the point here is whenever we're looking at a register, we say several things. Where does the register collect from? Ending with a preposition there, I know. But then we've also got alerts for the registers above or below certain dollar amounts, just like the inventory, alerts. And then, of course, some of the other bells and whistles, integrations. This is the QuickBooks integration that allows you to export a CSV or an IIF file. And just to give, for any accountants watching this, some more insight, it's account names, account types, and then this is an export import into the QuickBooks. So you've got your different payments, COGS, wholesales. This puts out a file that you can import into QuickBooks, and then pick up the rest of the P&L pieces, so to speak, that we don't track, which are very few, but they might be things like building depreciation or some other things that the accounting wheel was invented a long time ago, so we're not taking our time to reinvent that. Instead, putting all of the bells and whistles and the automation through the guts of the operation, the patient flow, the inventory flow, getting orders online versus on tablets versus drivers completing orders on the road on cell phones, and all those, all those pieces. And that's my general, that's my general kind of flow through the software. The questions often come up about things like, onboarding training. We've got coursework. You get a dedicated site and a training site, as well as a dedicated one of my onboarding specialists that you work with through the whole process. If you've got tons of stuff, we can do imports. So it's not all data entry on the front end, but it's an involved setup process so that life after setup is automated and very easy. And let's see if we have any questions.
Okay, so just as a reminder, go ahead and put your questions in the control panel and we will answer them now. So I do see two questions about integrating with the state system, and And I know you covered that some, but could you talk a little bit about our integration with Metric?
Yeah, you know, it's as real time as it can be. So what hasn't been built yet on the metric side of the integration is the sales order, or the sending out of the facility, so to speak. So like if you were a cultivator, you would do everything in MJ Freeway, take place on metric. Oh, there we're back. That would take place on metric, and you know, after I mean, you'd even buy in your tags on metric, right? So you'd buy in your tags, you do everything, and you do double data entry on the sales order, which will change once California, you know, gets moving, since a full API is required there by law. But you know, it's everything, and I can actually show a little bit of that. So like for instance, well, here's the knowledge base, and this is actually where you sign up for the APIs for anything that you're doing custom with our system. But to get back off of that, you know, even down to buying in the tags, you may go in here and say, well, I'm getting 1,000, and for all of us who know how metric works, they're consecutive tags, which makes this work perfectly well. So I've got tag whatever that I scan in here, 1,000 tags later is this ID, date received. When you, of course, tags associate to the system at the operative time. I mean, again, the head product gentleman on this system ran dual entry in Colorado for many years on metric. All the stuff is here when you had to run dual entry. This is even to the point when you change plants from propagation to veg, you can assign your tags then, of course, you know, if that's the state flow. So as integrated as possible, so you're not doing double data entry and saving a ton of labor in general, plus a ton of labor in tracking errors that will guaranteed happen on double data entry, even if they're at like a 0.5% clip of errors.
Awesome. Someone had a question about the marketing package and what it includes.
Yeah, so absolutely. The marketing package is going to include Weed Maps and Leafly integrations. It's going to include online ordering, text and email marketing, and patient loyalty. Lots of different pieces involved there. And I'm seeing the questions now. Let's see.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, and we can absolutely, we have a question here on pricing. And we can absolutely get, you know, there will be contact information at the end of this so you can get custom pricing from one of the reps, but certainly not going to leave it at that. The idea here is you pay modularly, and that really makes it so that it works for really any business type. And what I mean by that, you know, is think about it this way. If you've got, you know, say 3 storefronts, you pay for 3 store modules, but you don't pay for marketing 3 times, or supply chain 3 times, or any of the bells and whistles 3 times, right? So what it really ends up being is you can buy only what you need. And like I said before, I kind of dropped it in as I found this is a crucial piece to relay to folks, that besides all the bells and whistles and all this stuff, if we're talking mom and pop, you will be paying, you know, you can be paying under $1,000 a month, and then you've got state system integrations, barcodes, the labeling, the flow through the system, and it really makes it so that, I mean, that frankly, unless you're making very smart, you know, $20,000-$30,000 decisions every couple of days, like on the marketing end, the labor you're saving is going to increase your quality of life, you know, to the nth degree. And so this is, I mean, it's the same thing on the marketing package too, though. For instance, Leafly and Weed Maps, now you're not manually updating those menus. Right now it's integrated. You've got an online shopping cart that's integrated to this. So it all saves labor. But the base package, you know, even before state system integration, now you're barcoding stuff, labeling stuff, got compliant labels on things, and just barcoding, I mean, just barcode scanning through the point of sale, even if you're weighing on the spot, will really allow you to, I mean, easily double the number of orders in a day if you're at that point where you're, capped, so to speak. So what ends up happening in here is, even for somebody buying all the bells and whistles, it is, more expensive for the first system, and then every system after that is just the price of the module. So the more locations you have, the relatively cheaper it gets very quickly. So we did marketing.
If you have any other questions, go ahead and put them in the control panel, and we may have time for one more.
Yeah. And if there's any trouble getting a hold, on any end, I mean, Kiana will put up a slide at the end here that'll have the sales channel, and that's always answered. So.
Okay, and it looks like we do not have any more questions, so I'll go ahead and share that information now.
Perfect. Oh, and any different compliance markets that we have, of course, those are developed towards. Those are things like if different currencies are required, or if different languages, the system can be flipped on a per user basis to Spanish or French, as well as English, of course. And
the link to this, the link to this webinar will go out within 1 business day. So you don't have to do anything. It'll come right to your inbox tomorrow.
And can we include with this one, the link to the extraction infusion webinar?
Yeah,
So
I'll include that one as well. So you'll
Perfect.
get the link to this one and the extraction and infusion. Sorry, I didn't read the whole question. Awesome. All right. Well, it looks like those are all the questions. Thank you so much, Seth, for going through the retail portion of the software with everyone.
Absolutely.
And thank you, everyone. Awesome. Thank you, everyone, for attending. You can view all of our webinars on our website under the resources section. If you have any comments or would like to learn more about MJ Freeway, please use the information on the screen to contact us. And thank you again for joining. Everyone, have a great day.